flight manual hit the floor like a gunshot, jolting the room into silence. Captain Sarah Mitchell didn't flinch. Colonel Harrison loomed over her, voice cold and cutting. "A backup pilot who can't even fly straight? You disgrace this entire squadron." 50 elite pilots watched, some smirking, most avoiding her eyes. But Sarah didn't look down. Not this time. Not after everything. Her fingers curled at her sides as she forced her voice to stay buried. For now. Then came the final blow. "You're good for coffee runs, sweetheart. Maybe try paperwork instead of pretending to be a real pilot." Laughter broke the tension, but Sarah's gaze stayed locked on him, unblinking, unyielding. Inside her something ancient stirred. Not fear, not shame, something far more dangerous. Nobody in that room knows that 8 years ago this simple backup pilot executed the most dangerous rescue mission in modern Air Force history. Nobody knows she turned down the Medal of Honor and every promotion offered since, choosing invisibility over glory. Nobody knows that in exactly 8 minutes, she'll be the only one capable of saving every single life on this base. The morning sun streams through the briefing room windows, casting long shadows across the floor where her manual lies discarded, its pages fluttering like wounded birds. Sarah Mitchell, 5 feet 3 inches of quiet determination, simply bends down to retrieve it, her movements precise and controlled, betraying nothing of the storm brewing beneath her calm exterior. If you were publicly humiliated at work for being just a backup, would you stay silent or prove them wrong? Let me know where you're watching from, because what happens next will make you rethink every quiet person you've ever overlooked. Sarah Mitchell's life is a study in deliberate invisibility. She lives in a modest 1-bedroom apartment exactly 10 minutes from base, a place so unremarkable that delivery drivers often miss it entirely. Her neighbors know her only as the quiet woman who feeds the stray cats behind Building C and helps elderly Mrs. Chen carry groceries up 3 flights of stairs every Tuesday. She drives a 2015 Honda Civic with 120,000 miles on the odometer, its gray paint faded from years of Missouri sun. No bumper stickers, no personalization, nothing that would make anyone look twice. At Whiteman Air Force Base, she's assigned to Transport Squadron C-12, flying supply runs in prop planes that most combat pilots view with barely concealed disdain, a position reserved for those who couldn't cut it in the fighter squadron. Every morning at 0500 hours, a full 60 minutes before required, Sarah arrives at the base. Her blonde hair is always pulled back in the same regulation bun, not a strand out of place. She wears no makeup, no jewelry except the simple silver watch that never leaves her wrist. While other pilots gather in the officers' lounge, trading war stories over black coffee and yesterday's donuts, Sarah sits alone in the corner of the ready room, surrounded by flight manuals. But these aren't manuals for transport planes. They're technical specifications for F-22 Raptors, F-35 Lightning IIs, aircraft she's supposedly never been cleared to fly. Lieutenant Danny Chen, one of the few pilots who treats her with genuine kindness, once found her studying advanced combat maneuvers at 4:30 in the morning. "Why do you study Rapture manuals when you fly transports?" he'd asked, genuinely curious. Sarah had looked up from the complex diagrams, a ghost of a smile crossing her face. "You never know when knowledge might save lives," she'd replied, then returned to her reading as if she hadn't just hinted at something far deeper. Chen had noticed other things too, the way she instinctively checks wind patterns every few seconds, even when indoors, a habit ingrained in combat pilots who've learned that seconds mean survival. Her small frame, which makes other pilots assume she can't handle the crushing G-forces of fighter jets, yet she never seems tired after flights that leave others exhausted. During routine physicals, medics note her resting heart rate of 42 beats per minute, athletic conditioning that seems excessive for a transport pilot. There's the scar too, a faded line along her left temple that she carefully conceals with her hair. When new pilots ask about it, she claims it's from a childhood bicycle accident. But Bobby Torres, the maintenance chief who's worked on military aircraft for 30 years, recognizes shrapnel scarring when he sees it. He's also noticed how she flinches just barely, almost imperceptibly, whenever anyone mentions Operation Desert Angel, that classified mission from 2017 that nobody's supposed to talk about. The mission where an unnamed pilot flew alone into impossible odds and saved 10,000 lives. The pilot, whose identity was buried so deep in classified files that even most generals don't have clearance to know the truth. 3 months ago, Wing Commander Davidson tried to promote her to squadron leader. The position came with better pay, better housing, and most importantly, visibility. Sarah had sat in his office, hands folded in her lap, and politely declined. "I'm not ready for that responsibility, sir," she'd said, her voice steady and sure. Davidson had been baffled. Pilots fought for promotions, especially female pilots trying to advance in a male-dominated field. But Sarah knew what he didn't. Visibility meant questions. Questions meant her past would resurface. And that past holds a secret that would change everything. One she's desperate to keep buried beneath the facade of mediocrity she's so carefully constructed. The morning after Colonel Harrison's public humiliation continues to spiral into something far more dangerous than anyone realizes. Sarah retreats to Hangar 7, where the transport planes are housed, needing the familiar smell of aviation fuel and engine oil to steady her nerves. Maintenance Chief Bobby Torres finds her there, running pre-fleet checks on a C-12 that isn't scheduled to fly for another 6 hours. "Don't let Harrison get to you," Bobby says, his voice gruff with concern. "He's got a reputation for grinding down anyone he sees as weak." Sarah simply nods, her hands moving across the control panels with practiced efficiency. But Bobby, who's spent 3 decades watching pilots, notices something that makes his blood run cold. She's checking systems that transport pilots never touch, weapon systems that don't exist on these planes. Radar jammers and countermeasures. Her muscle memory is betraying her, revealing training that goes far beyond cargo runs. Meanwhile, Colonel Harrison leads the morning's training exercise from the control tower, orchestrating a complex formation flight involving 12 F-16s. He assigns Sarah to ground control, making a show of it in front of the other officers. "This is where backup pilots belong," he announces, loud enough for everyone to hear. Watching real pilots do real work. Sarah takes her position at the radar console without complaint, her fingers unconsciously tracing flight patterns on the screen. She spots inefficiencies in their formation immediately, gaps that could prove fatal in combat, angles that leave them vulnerable to missile lock. Her hands itch to grab the radio, to correct their positions, but she remains silent. At 0800 hours precisely, a black SUV convoy arrives at the main gate. General Patricia Williams steps out, her presence commanding immediate attention. She's a legend in the Air Force, the first female combat pilot to see action in Iraq, now overseeing pilot standards nationwide. Her inspection visit has been planned for months, but something about today feels different. As she reviews personnel files in the commander's office, her aide, Major Thompson, watches her suddenly freeze at one particular file. "Mitchell," she murmurs, the name rolling off her tongue like a half-remembered dream. Sarah Mitchell. Why is that name so familiar? The break room buzzes with gossip as pilots gather for their mid-morning coffee. Captain Rico Martinez leans against the counter, shaking his head in disbelief. "I'm telling you, she scored perfect on the F-20T2 simulator last month. Perfect. Nobody scores perfect their first time, but she claims she's never flown one." Lieutenant Emma Foster chimes in, her voice lowered to avoid being overheard. "During last year's emergency drills, I watched her. The way she moved, the procedures she followed, it was like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Transport pilots, Don't train for combat scenarios like that. Captain Mike O'Brien adds the final piece to the puzzle. Bobby Torres told me something weird. Yesterday, she was checking the weapon systems on a transport plane. Except transports don't have weapon systems. She knew exactly where they'd be on a fighter, moved like it was second nature. The group falls silent as Colonel Harrison enters the break room, his presence immediately changing the atmosphere. He's overheard enough to comment, his laugh sharp and dismissive. Classroom knowledge. Any rookie can memorize manuals and simulator patterns. Put her in a real fighter with real G-forces and real weapons, she'd be crying for her mother in 5 seconds. But something nags at Harrison as he pours his coffee, a detail from this morning that won't leave him alone. When he'd humiliated her in front of everyone, Sarah hadn't shown fear. Her trembling hadn't been from intimidation, it had been restraint, the kind of controlled response that comes from someone who's faced far worse than verbal abuse. Someone who's learned that the most dangerous predators often hide in plain sight. He pushes the thought away, his ego refusing to acknowledge what his instincts are trying to tell him. In the commander's office, General Williams' aide returns from the classified archives, his face pale despite his dark complexion. "Ma'am, I found something. Operation Desert Angel 2017. The pilot's name was classified beyond even top-secret clearance, but the physical description..." He slides a folder across the desk, his hand slightly unsteady. Williams opens it, her expression shifting from curiosity to shock as she reads. 5 feet 3 inches, blonde hair, female, extraordinary reflexes and tactical innovation, sustained injuries during the mission but refused medical discharge, requested complete anonymity and transfer to non-combat duty. "Get me Colonel Harrison," Williams orders, her voice carrying the weight of someone who's just uncovered a truth that changes everything. Now. The sirens begin at 10:47 hours, their wail cutting through the morning air like a blade through silk. Code red, incoming hostile aircraft. All pilots to stations, this is not a drill. The control tower erupts into controlled chaos as radar screens light up with 6 unidentified fighters approaching at Mach 2, using stolen US military transponder codes to confuse their defense systems. Communications are jammed. Automated defenses have been mysteriously disabled, and the hostiles are following flight paths that suggest intimate knowledge of the base's vulnerabilities. Estimated time to arrival, 8 minutes. Colonel Harrison scrambles to coordinate a defense, but panic spreads through the ranks like wildfire. Half of the F-16s won't start. Later investigation will reveal sophisticated sabotage. The pilots, who are ready, are scattered across the base, some still in the mess hall, others in briefing rooms. The alert fighters need a minimum of 5 minutes to launch, and that's with everything going perfectly. They have 8 minutes. And nothing is going perfectly. Harrison's carefully maintained facade of control begins to crack as he realizes the horrible truth. They're not going to make it. Sarah stands in the control tower, her transport pilot insignia a mockery in this moment of crisis. She watches the chaos unfold with an expression that those who know combat would recognize, the 1,000-yard stare of someone who's been here before. General Williams bursts through the door, clutching a classified file like a lifeline. Their eyes meet across the room, and in that moment, years of carefully maintained secrecy crumble. "It was you," Williams whispers, her voice barely audible above the sirens. "The pilot who saved 10,000 lives in Syria, who flew through impossible odds when her entire squadron was shot down, who turned down the Medal of Honor to stay anonymous." Sarah's response is measured, her voice carrying the weight of old pain. "That pilot died in Syria, General. I'm just a backup now." But even as she speaks, her eyes are tracking the radar screens, calculating intercept vectors and fuel loads with the instinctive precision of someone who's lived and breathed aerial combat. Williams steps closer, her next words urgent and desperate. "We need her back. Right now, those hostiles aren't random. Look at their approach patterns. They know exactly where we're vulnerable." The past crashes into the present with the force of a sonic boom. Syria 2017 Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, callsign Angel, had flown solo into enemy territory after her squadron was ambushed and shot down. Outnumbered 20-1, she'd used experimental maneuvers that physics said were impossible, dancing her F-22 through missile locks and enemy fighters like a ghost made of steel and determination. The refugee camp below held 10,000 civilians, families who'd fled the fighting only to find themselves trapped between advancing forces. Sarah had made a choice that day, one that would haunt her dreams for years to come. She'd engaged the enemy alone, using tactics so innovative and dangerous that they'd later be classified beyond top secret. She'd saved them all. Every last civilian made it to safety. But the cost had been severe. Shrapnel from a near miss had left her with injuries that officially ended her combat career, though the truth was more complex. She'd requested anonymity, not out of humility, but because the tactics she'd developed were too valuable to reveal. If enemies knew what she could do, they'd develop countermeasures. Better to let the world think that pilot had died, taking those secrets to the grave. Now in the present crisis, Colonel Harrison storms into the control tower, his face red with exertion and fear. "Where are my pilots?" he sees Sarah, and his expression twists with disgust. "Get out, Mitchell, this is for real pilots, not backup." General Williams cuts him off with a voice like steel. Captain Mitchell is taking lead. The colonel's face cycles through confusion to disbelief. "She's Desert Angel." Time seems to stop. Every person in the control tower turns to stare at Sarah, the implications hitting them like physical blows. Harrison's face drains of all color as the magnitude of his error becomes clear. The pilot he'd humiliated, belittled and dismissed was a legend who'd chosen obscurity over glory. A warrior who'd traded her wings for anonymity to protect the very tactics that might save them now. The gossip, the perfect simulator scores, the mysterious knowledge, it all makes horrible sense. Sarah doesn't waste precious seconds on their shock. 8 minutes have become 6, and every heartbeat brings death closer. "Torres, get me anything that flies. Shen, you're my wing." She's already moving, muscle memory taking over as she strips off her transport pilot patches. Underneath, barely visible, are the combat wings she never stopped wearing. A small act of defiance against a fate she'd chosen but never fully accepted. In the hangar, chaos reigns as mechanics scramble to prep aircraft. Only one F-22 Raptor is flight-ready, the most advanced fighter in their arsenal, requiring years of specialized training to fly effectively. Sarah climbs into the cockpit like she's coming home, her hands finding controls she hasn't touched in years but never forgot. Danny Chen scrambles into an F-16, his face pale but determined. "Ma'am, 6 against 2, those aren't good odds." Sarah's response comes through the radio, calm and certain. "I've had worse odds, Lieutenant. Trust me and follow my lead exactly. We're going to do things they won't expect, because they're not supposed to be possible." 4 minutes remaining as Sarah's Raptor screams off the runway, its engines pushing past recommended limits. The hostile fighters expect standard defensive maneuvers, the textbook responses that American pilots are trained to execute. Instead, Sarah gives them something from a different book entirely, one written in Syrian skies with blood and desperation. She executes the Mitchell Spiral, a maneuver she invented when physics said it couldn't be done. The Raptor climbs vertically, its engines straining against gravity, then stalls deliberately at precisely the right moment. As the aircraft begins to fall, she rotates 180 degrees while maintaining targeting lock, firing during the controlled fall. 2 hostiles disintegrate in balls of flame before they can process what's happening. Their final transmissions are cut short, confusion evident even through the static. Chen follows Sarah's lead with absolute faith, trusting her voice in his ear as she guides him through maneuvers that his training says are impossible. Bank left, 40 degrees, nose down, 20 now. Together they create a defensive net that shouldn't work, using the Raptor's advanced systems in ways the designers never intended. Combined, with Chen's F-16 in patterns that defy conventional tactical wisdom. In the control tower, Harrison watches his arrogance crumble in real time. Every assumption he'd made, every prejudice he'd harbored, burns away as Sarah saves the base he nearly lost. The remaining hostiles try to adapt, but Sarah's flying exists in a space between instinct and innovation. She doesn't just pilot the aircraft, she becomes one with it, making the impossible look effortless. 3 minutes, 2 minutes. One by one, the hostile aircraft fall from the sky. Their pilots, unable to counter tactics that exist in no manual, no training program, no computer simulation. As the last hostile spirals toward the Earth, trailing smoke and flame, Sarah's radio crackles with a dying transmission that changes everything. Mission failed. Target Mitchell survived. Desert Angel lives. The words hang in the air like a revelation. This wasn't a random attack on an American base. It was an assassination attempt, carefully orchestrated by remnants of the Syrian network she'd destroyed 8 years ago. They'd waited, planned, used Harrison's predictable prejudice to ensure she'd be grounded and vulnerable. They'd counted on the American military's own bias to clip the wings of their greatest threat. The base is secure, but the echoes of what almost happened ripple through every person who witnessed it. Sarah lands her Raptor with the same precision she's shown throughout the engagement, the aircraft touching down like a whisper despite the violence it's just delivered. Hundreds gather on the tarmac, mechanics, pilots, support staff, all drawn by the impossible story spreading like wildfire. General Williams approaches with a phalanx of media representatives, medal boxes in hand, promotion papers ready. This is the moment military careers dream of. The vindication and recognition that transforms good pilots into legends. Sarah powers down the Raptor, removes her helmet, and steps out onto the wing. The crowd falls silent, waiting for words that will match the moment. Instead, she simply climbs down, hands her helmet to the crew chief, and walks past them all. "Just doing my job, General," she says quietly, her tone making it clear that no amount of fanfare will change her mind. She's not interested in becoming a symbol, a poster, a recruitment tool. She did what was necessary, nothing more, nothing less. Colonel Harrison, his career in ruins and under investigation for security failures that his bias enabled, attempts to intercept her. His apology stumbles out, words tangled with shame and desperation. Sarah stops, turns and delivers judgment with surgical precision. "You were right about one thing, Colonel. I am just a backup pilot. Backups exist for when the system fails." She pauses, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Today you were the system." Then she walks away, leaving him to contemplate how his prejudice nearly cost hundreds of lives. 1 week passes, and the full scope of what happened becomes clear through the investigation. The enemy had studied American military culture, recognized the bias against female pilots, particularly those in non-combat roles. They'd gambled that someone like Harrison would keep Sarah grounded through sheer prejudice, making her an easy target. They'd almost been right. General Williams sits across from Sarah in the same briefing room where this story began, the morning sun casting similar shadows across the floor. But everything else has changed. The general offers Sarah anything within her power to give. Squadron command, a Pentagon position, public recognition that would make her the face of American air power. "I have one request, General," Sarah says, her voice calm and certain. Williams leans forward, ready to grant whatever this hero asks. "Name it." Sarah's response stuns her into silence. "Let me stay exactly where I am." The general's expression cycles through confusion to disbelief. "You could change everything for female pilots, become the face of—" But Sarah interrupts with gentle firmness. "With respect, General. I've seen what becoming a symbol does. It makes you a target. It turns your life into everyone else's statement, their cause, their rallying cry. I just want to fly. And sometimes, the best place to make a difference is from the shadows. The general tries again, invoking duty, service, the greater good. But Sarah has thought this through during long nights when sleep wouldn't come. The pilots who need mentorship will find me. The tactics I've developed work because nobody expects them. The moment I become famous is the moment I become useless. Let me train your pilots quietly. Let me develop protocols without fanfare. Let me be the secret weapon that nobody sees coming. It's not the answer Williams wants, but she recognizes the wisdom in it. Some warriors are meant for spotlights and podiums. Others are meant for the shadows, where the real work often happens. Sarah returns to Transport Squadron C-12, but the dynamic has shifted in subtle ways. Young female pilots seek her out during off hours, hungry for guidance from someone who's proven that size and gender are irrelevant in the cockpit. She teaches them the things that no manual covers: how to trust their instincts, how to find advantages in perceived weaknesses, how to let underestimation become their greatest weapon. She develops new defensive protocols that get implemented across the Air Force, always credited to anonymous sources or collective pilot feedback. Colonel Harrison receives his transfer orders to a desk position in Alaska, his career effectively over. It's a lenient punishment, considering his actions nearly led to catastrophe, but Sarah had quietly recommended mercy. He's learned his lesson, she'd told General Williams. Sometimes the best teachers are our worst mistakes. Danny Chen becomes her unofficial partner in the Transport Squadron, learning combat techniques disguised as emergency procedures and weather avoidance maneuvers. Other pilots join them, creating an informal training ground where the next generation learns from the best without ever knowing it. 6 months have passed since that morning of humiliation and vindication. Another colonel arrives at Whiteman, full of bluster and outdated opinions about the soft transport division. Colonel Marcus Webb, fresh from a Pentagon posting, makes it his mission to toughen up what he sees as the weak link in the base's operations. He finds Sarah pre-flighting a cargo plane in the pre-dawn darkness, her routine unchanged despite everything that's happened. "Careful with that heavy equipment, sweetheart," he says with a condescending smile. "Wouldn't want to break a nail." The words echo Harrison's mistake, history preparing to repeat itself. Sarah looks up from her checklist, that same calm in her blue eyes that has fooled so many. "You're right, sir. I'll be careful." Her tone is perfectly respectful, giving nothing away. Danny Chen, working on the adjacent aircraft, hides a smile behind his hand. He knows what Colonel Webb doesn't, that he's just insulted the guardian angel of American airspace. From her office window, General Williams watches the interaction with a knowing smile. She's learned to station herself here whenever new officers arrive, enjoying the moment when they inevitably underestimate Captain Sarah Mitchell. The new colonel struts away, satisfied with asserting his dominance over a mere transport pilot. He has no idea that within a month he'll be asking for transfer, unable to explain why his combat pilots keep being outmaneuvered in training exercises by cargo planes. He doesn't know that Sarah has turned the Transport Squadron into an elite training ground, where pilots learn to fly like their lives depend on it, because one day they might. He doesn't know that the quiet woman he just dismissed has saved more lives than he'll ever know about, and will continue to do so from the shadows she's chosen. Dawn breaks over Whiteman Air Force Base with a palette of gold and crimson, painting the sky in colors that remind Sarah of Syrian sunsets and second chances. She walks toward her transport plane with coffee in one hand and a clipboard in the other, the picture of ordinary military routine. A grey tabby cat follows at her heels. She's adopted the hangar stray, naming him Maverick in a moment of irony that only she appreciates. To anyone watching, she looks like nobody special. That's exactly how the best warriors prefer it. In the sky above, a flight of F-22 Raptors passes overhead in perfect formation. Sarah doesn't look up, but she knows them all. Pilots she's secretly trained, using tactics she developed in desperate skies. They fly with a confidence that comes from knowing someone watches over them. Someone who's proven that the most powerful person in any room is often the one everyone overlooks. The transport plane's engines warm up with a familiar rumble, and Sarah climbs aboard to start another day of being invisible. Real strength doesn't need spotlights or recognition. Real heroes don't need titles or medals displayed in cases. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the quiet one in the corner, the one who's seen too much to need to prove anything to anyone. The backup who becomes essential only when everything else fails. The simple woman who saves the world before breakfast and never mentions it at lunch. As Sarah's transport plane lifts into the morning sky, carrying supplies and secrets in equal measure, the base below continues its daily rhythm, protected by a guardian angel who chose anonymity over acclaim. And in that choice, she found a different kind of power. The power to make a difference without becoming a target, to change lives without losing her own, to be extraordinary while appearing perfectly ordinary. The story of Captain Sarah Mitchell serves as a reminder that not all heroes wear their medals on their chest. Some wear them on their souls. Invisible but unbreakable, forged in fires that the world will never fully know about. And perhaps that's the greatest strength of all. The ability to be powerful without needing to prove it, to be exceptional while choosing to appear average, to save the world and then go home to feed a stray cat, knowing that tomorrow will bring new challenges that nobody will see her overcome. In the end, the measure of a true warrior isn't in the recognition they receive, but in the lives they touch, the disasters they prevent, and the quiet dignity with which they carry secrets that could change everything but never will, because some battles are best won in silence.